We will begin by taking you on a visual journey through Los Angeles. It's 2021. You are driving through LA neighborhoods. Pastel-colored boxes advertising strange yet familiar atomic age doodads appear everywhere. The relic of a bygone era radiates from their ornamental glamour. These buildings are weird. Cars on display in overhanging parking reflect the car-centric society. Gilded signs and decorative tile suggesting a glamour just beyond reach poke at a classic advertising culture. The thing about these dingbats is the turbulent history behind their image. What was cheaply built in the 1950s only to last 30 years is now historically preserved to represent a former billboard culture. The dingbat came into existence in post-war LA during a booming consumer economy where many Angelenos found themselves moving upwards socially. The dingbat served as a transitory materialist figure, allowing families and singles to move into the city for a cheap price. The dingbat's reputation suffered between the 1970s and 2000s. A new zoning ordinance that outlawed dingbats, along with the recognition of their structural vulnerability, established a negative sentiment that rudely set the decline of the dingbat image. However, through officialization of its historic status and re-representation by artists in the 2000s, a new fascination in its image and typology rose. The re-enchantment of the dingbat reached a broad audience, including historians, architects, residents, and the mass public. Many consider this odd, sometimes ugly, building an important contribution to Los Angeles and contemporary life in the metropolis. We will explore the dingbat's representation through three distinct timelines: economic, sentiment, and media. First, let's understand what a dingbat means formally.
The Dingbat, a two-story wood-framed apartment building constructed between the 1950s and 70s, built to the maximum area of the single-family lot with tucked-under parking, 5 to 12 units, and approximately 7,500 square feet. They were cheaply and efficiently constructed for-profit development and fulfilled a need for medium-density housing, bringing many people to the city. The dingbat can be thought of as an exterior billboard facade facing the city with cheap housing hidden behind. Diving into the three timelines that unravel the mystery of the dingbat. The prehistory of the dingbat is tied inextricably to the history of the growth of LA. Western expansion across the country and dreams of sunny weather and single-family home ownership caused the city of Los Angeles to grow from a minor city of 100,000 people in 1900 to more than 1.5 million in 1940. As the city rapidly expanded, it was racially redlined in order to demarcate areas of security and desirability. With growth, new ways of housing the masses were needed, which resulted in California-birth typologies such as the bungalow home and the tightly clumped bungalow court. The single-family home was the living style of choice. Modernist architecture styles from Europe that symbolized ease of construction and new ways of inhabiting the world began to seep into the built vernacular of Los Angeles. These changes brought with it car-centric design and the rapid materialist consumer.
Following World War II, the population increased by over 1 million in 15 years, prompting a boom in building and fresh ideas of how a city should be inhabited. Temporary military housing like Roger Young Village was removed, and newly built freeways displaced Black, Brown, and other communities. An urgent need for the replacement of the housing stock was materializing. With most land in Los Angeles taken up by single-family, many radical ways of building were introduced. The dingbat was a 7 to 10 multi-story dwelling that was 2 to 3 stories and occupied a single-family lot. This cheap but efficient mode of construction enabled housing relief, whereas the outer corners of the city experienced development on a large swaths of land. The dingbat allowed for living in the midst of the city near freeways and with quick access to places of work and fun. The popular atomic age Ornamental doodads known as dingbats, which gave the type its name, allowed each residence to project itself as an existing billboard, papering over the repetitive generic design of units within. During the 1970s and 80s, just as the dingbat became part of the cultural imagination, improvements to zoning requirements led to its decline. The new parking regulations passed in 1964 required 1.5 parking spaces for a two-bedroom apartment. This made the dingbat apartment not as appealing to developers and essentially halted the building of the typology. At this point, Rainer Banham has already brought the dingbat to popular culture and made its image iconic. The work of artists Ed Ruscha, Leslie M. Siegel, and Judy Fiskin, among others, feature the dingbat apartment prominently, as it can be seen from the street in the drive-by. These critical works of deadpan photography brought even more discourse about the self-advertising apartment in Los Angeles and the West Coast. The artists used mostly black and white photography. This medium sanitized the happy pastel colors and made the images archival and matter of fact. That chronicled the dingbat as a phenomenon and embedded it in the architectural and art discourse. Thus, the Victorian Scott Brown's decorated shed has become a duck.
In the 1990s and 2000s, LA demographics solidifies its status as a cultural melting pot. Middle-class families gain economic power. Mid-century buildings start to show their age. Demand for efficient densification threatens old-time relics, like the dingbat, into obsolescence. Responding to its quick physical degradation, but a small growing fan base, the LA Conservancy drafted a preservation plan for the dingbat in 2003. The 1994 Northridge earthquake rumbled over 200 soft-story dingbats to collapse. Not too long after, in 1998, the Slums of Beverly Hills film underscores the economic divide in LA using the dingbat as its backdrop. The dingbat's reputation starts to decline. In media, however, professional photographers start to capture the whimsicality of mid-century Googie architecture. Clive Piercy embraced the crappiness of it and spread his infatuation for dingbats in a 448-page photo series. His work responds to Judy Fiskin's deadpan technique using black and white photography. Some photos are in motion, while others are angled. This careless but honest representation addresses the typology through an outsider's perspective, which is increasingly less subjective. Amateur photographers continue this documentation on digital platforms like Flickr. With historic preservationists on its side, the dingbat returns to the public reception with positive regard. New developments start to resemble its typology. Artists, residents, and Angelenos independently herald the dingbat as a historic icon. Demographics shift nearly to 80% mixed race population in the white collar and middle class level. The LA Conservancy officially declared the dingbat typology a historic building in 2012. They followed up with a requirement to retrofit all soft-story buildings as a part of its preservation. Today, 119 dingbats are undergoing soft-story preservation. The 2021 low-rise competition responds to the need for fully utilized single-family plots. Approved ADU plans adopt iconic LA styles, including the dingbat. Angelenos take to online forums to discuss the dingbat's history and its weirdness and share opinions from distaste to adoration. Many users, like the residents, are starting to recognize this typology as the dingbat. In media, this is the era of nostalgia and imitation. The dingbat populates Instagrams, Flickr albums, and art forums. Its typology even appears on commercial business buildings. Our walkthrough of LA reflects the on-the-go style from Clive Piercy to Judy Fiskin. Carcentricity, both in its exhibition of cars and in the roll-by photographic method, is still strongly present.
In summary, economically, the dingbat began as a means to an end, and today, after a brief period of setbacks, remains a popular, affordable option for low-income Angelenos. Sentimentally, the Dingbat has reflected the superficial glamour of a star-studded city with a rising tide of mass media representation. And in media and representation, the Dingbat was a cultural pariah of the 1970s. Curiosity in its multitudinous facade of personalities dominating digital forms of representation, currently revealing the cultural imaginary of Los Angeles. Today, the prevailing image has returned to its origin, hoping for a new future with an attractive front, cheap living, and mostly positive public representation.
Our dingbat is called the Hauser. So this is our selected precedent case study. It's completed in 1955 with 7 units, 5 one-bedroom and 2 two-bedroom units at 5,900 square feet. It's located in the Wilshire district of central LA. And we got the opportunity to interview one of the residents there, Charlie Phillips. When he first moved in 22 years ago, he just said, I just needed a place to live. 22 years later, he knows all the residents by name, and he feels the sense of camaraderie and community. And he now says, I enjoy where I live because everything is accessible by car and because he has the sense of community in this Hauser dingbat. This dingbat, from a collection of historical documents that we found on it, used to be single-family plot, and now it's a multifamily property. The explosion of the dingbat was built on a single-family lot back in the 1950s and became more and more available, taking advantage, maximizing the plot, and using the tuck-under parking to accommodate for the vehicles. It follows a typical dingbat floor plan, and it is currently listed as a historic site and is undergoing soft story construction.
During our visit, we took copious photos to create a photogrammetry model, and this is more of a close-up of Charlie's apartment, mainly kitchen and a living room. Here are our results. This is a turntable of the model that we made, showing the interior juxtaposed with the exterior of the Hauser apartment building. And this is just a fun little piece that we made where you can move around and essentially create a dingbat as any contractor would at the time. A simple stucco box with some decorations.
So finally, the dingbat has represented an affordable housing type that is not only affordable, but also an attractive figure of what could be affordable. Questions of its sustainability still remain. How does this building give residents dignity? Does it even matter? Owners will pay around $300,000 in the next few years to retrofit up to code. That may be an uptick of up to $38 per month in rent for the next 2 to 5 years. With an increasing need for densifying metropolitan Los Angeles with affordable options, the dingbat may see more challenges functionally and financially down the road. At the same time, a rising tide of artists, historians, residents, and fans altogether may be its salvation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.